Hey there, this is Kamal, and in this video we'll be looking at how we can create the UI of our blog application using Laravel. So let's get this started. Alright, so this video is part of the Laravel mini series that we have going on YouTube. And if you haven't seen the previous video explaining the folder structure and the MVC architecture that we follow in Laravel, then I highly suggest you to see that video once, and once you're done with that, then you can carry on from here. Alright, so in order to get started with our application, let's first create our home page. So for that, let's go to the views folder, and in that, let's create a new file. Let's name it as, in that, let's generate the boilerplate template. So let's type in exclamation mark and click on tab, and that's going to autofill that. Now let's name it as Laravel blog. Alright, so inside of this, let's just create a simple h1 tag, and let's say, hi, this is Kamal. Let's save that. Now let's go to our routes file. So there are two ways in which we can call this. The first way is to directly write our route here, or instead what we can do is that we can create a new separate file and write all of our post routes inside of that particular file. So what I'll do is that I'll go to the routes folder. In that, I'll create a new file. So let's name it as blog.php. Now I'll just import the files. So I'll just import this from here. Right, now below this, let's cut this from here and let's paste it out here. Alright, so now what we have to do is that we have to just call the blog.php into this particular web.php, because web.php is our main route file, right? So in order to do that, we can just type in include, then just type in __ dir and close it off with _ again, then type it out as dot, then quotations, and instead of that you have to type it /blog.php, okay, because we are connecting to the blog.php, which is present inside the same root directory that we are in right now, that is under routes, right? So this line will actually include the blog.php into the web.php file. Now inside of this we have the /route, which is the default route. So when you type in /, it's going to go to our index function. So let's go to our post controller, and in that we have the index function. So let's remove this from here, and instead let's return home.blade.php, right? So let's type it as home and let's save that. Alright, so before that we have to first start the server. So let's open the terminal and let's type in php artisan serve. Alright, so now that the server has started, let's go to the browser and let's type in localhost 8000. So we have something like this. So essentially we have the home page being rendered. So now let's change that. So let's go and actually add in Bootstrap into our application. So I'll go to getbootstrap.com. So if you don't know what Bootstrap is a library which we can use to add in quick functionality of CSS and JavaScript. So if you have no idea what that is, I've already made a crash course on explaining Bootstrap. So I'll link that in the card above or in the description down below. You can go there and check that out. So for this, let's go to the documentation section and let's copy the CSS tags and let's go to the home page. Let's minimize this, right? So inside the head section, I'll add it here. I'll also type in a comment here explaining that this is Bootstrap CSS. Right, now let's save that. Alright, so now let's go back and let's also copy the JS files. So you can go with the bundle version or the separate version as well. I'll go with the bundled version and I'll add that in the body section. And let's save that. Let's also add a comment here, Bootstrap JS. Okay, so let's save that and let's go to the browser and refresh. You'll see that this is the new styling which is being applied because of Bootstrap. Alright, so now we are basically done with creating the boilerplate template of our application, because all the code that we want to write will be basically changing here only. Apart from that, all the remaining things will be same, right? So now the thing is that if we, let's say, create a new page, like let's say we create an about page or a create page or anything like that, all these pages will have this head and body which is same, right? This will not change. So essentially what we want to create is we want to create a layout wherein this will remain constant and only this particular section inside the body will change according to whatever page that we currently have. So in Laravel, in order to accomplish that, we use what is known as layouts. So inside the views folder, I'll be creating a new folder called as layouts. Now inside of that layouts folder, let's create a new file and let's name it as default.blade.php. I'll just copy what I have here or cut it out from here and paste it in this particular file. So the thing here is that all of this will remain constant. The only thing that will change is this particular section, right? So whatever we have here will change, right? So what we want to make is that we want to actually use this as a template, and we want to take the data that we type here. Like let's say I have a h1 tag here with hi. I just want to take that data here and embed it into this particular, section. So in order to actually accomplish that, we use an annotation which is present inside of Laravel called as yield. So in order to use an annotation, you have to type in @, then the annotation name. So there are multiple annotations that we can use. For now, let's use an annotation called as yield, right? So I'll type in YEILD, and you have to close it off with parentheses. Inside of that, you have to give it a name. Let's say I'll give it as content, right? So what this means is that wherever you use this particular layout, if in that particular file, if there is a section which is named as content, then take that data and replace this particular yield statement with that particular data. Like, let's say if I want to replace this yield with the homepage data. So what I'll do is that first I have to extend this layout, right? Essentially I have to use this layout inside this particular file. So in order to use that layout, I have to type in another annotation called as extends. Now inside of this @extends, I have to type in the layout name, right? So the layout which I want to particularly use, because we can have multiple layouts and I want to use specifically the default layout. So in order to do that, you have to type in quotations, then layouts dot, then the name of the layout. In this case, it's going to be default. This is referencing to the layouts folder, and in that is referencing to the default layout name, right? So this will call that. Now, since that has been connected, now what we have to do is that we have to create a section which will be, taken from here and added into this particular place, right? So for that, we have to type in @section. So it is another annotation, and you have to end the section as well. Okay, so we have to start a section and we have to end a section. Now, whatever you type in between these particular, end and start section, that will be replaced here. But how do we connect that? Since I've told you previously that we name those sections, right? So here as well, we'll name this particular section. So for that, you'll have to type the quotations, and in that you have to type in content. Now let's save that. And now let's say I just type in here something like h1 of, let's say, hi. If I save that, what it's going to do is that essentially it's going to extend this particular layout, and it's going to take the data present in between the start and the end of this particular section and replace that in this particular, layout file where this particular yield is being typed out, right? If I save this and if I go to the browser and if I refresh, okay, there was a spelling error. It is not YEILD, it's YIELD. Let's save that and refresh. Now hi is being printed. Okay, there is no comma here, I think. Yes, hi is being printed. So essentially what's happening here is that this particular data is being taken from here and it is being replaced in this particular location, right? So that is how you use layouts. So in this way, we have made this static and only this particular section to be dynamic, and this will change based on the file through which we are calling the layout. So that is how you reuse the layouts in Laravel. So apart from this yield annotation, you also have some other annotations like include and so things. For that, you have to actually go to the Laravel documentation section, and you can just browse through that and you'll be able to understand how we can use those different annotations and see how we can create different layouts. So this is going to be a simple series, so I'll not be covering all the annotations. I'll just cover all the annotations which we require in this particular app to work, right? So these are the basic annotations. Alright, so let's start creating the actual application. So let's go to the layout once again. And I want to add some properties to the body directly. And that is, I'll be using a class which is present inside of Bootstrap, and that is bg-duck. And also what I'll be doing is that I'll be wrapping this whole content inside of a division. So let's do that. Let's indent that and let's save that. So this is just so that we can have some modularized structure. So let's go back to the home page and let's start creating the actual data that we want to showcase. So let me quickly type in what we'll be showcasing in the home page. So I'll just type it out first and then I'll explain. Okay, so essentially what I've done is that I've created a h1 tag, h6 and a paragraph with some dummy data. Then I also have a button created using the anchor tag, and I've given it as a name called as show blogs. Apart from that, I also have an image which is present inside of a division so that it will be centered. And also I have this inside of a container, right? That container is also having text center property and text white. So all of this text will be white because our body is by default given a color of dark. And apart from that, I've flexed all of this to the center and also justified it to the center and also made it so that it occupies minimum height of our viewport, right? That is our screen. If I save this and if I go to the browser, and this is the data that we have, right? So now what we can do is that we can actually add the image here. So in order to actually add the image, what we have to do is that we have to actually go to our public folder. Instead of our public folder, we can create a new images folder and we can access the data from there, right? So let me create a new folder here. Let's name it as images. So in that images, I'll have to add the image that I want to showcase. So let me quickly do that. Okay, so what I've done is that I've created 3 new folders. One is CSS, second is images, and the third one is JS. So in the images, I have a blog-post.svg. That is this particular image, which is an SVG. We'll be showcasing that. Apart from that, I also have the CSS folder, and in that I have the bootstrap.min.css and the style.css. So this bootstrap is the exact same file that we're linking to here. So instead of having the CDN link, what we can do is that we can directly link to our own file which is present under the CSS folder, right? So that is present here. So in order to do that, or in order to actually link to any other asset that we want inside of our application, what we have to do is that we have to use a particular syntax, right? So let's say I want to link to the image. So inside the src, I'll open and close 2 double braces. In that, I'm going to type in something called as asset, and that is a function. Inside of that asset, I have to give the path of the asset that I want to use. In this case, I want to go to the images folder, right? So this asset is going to directly link to your public folder, right? Where is that public folder? It is present here, right? So it is going to link directly to the public folder, and in that it's going to go and search for the images folder, right? We also have an images folder. In that, I want to show the blog-post.svg, right? If I save that and if I go to the browser, you'll see when I refresh the page, we have the image here. Let's decrease the size of this. So I'll type in the class here. It's going to be a fluid and width is going to be 50. Let's save that. Let's go to the browser and refresh once again. And this is what we have. Alright, so similarly, let's also link the CSS and JS files as well. So let's remove this from here. And also let's remove the href, right? So let's remove that and let's type in the asset once again. In that, let's go to the CSS folder and now let's link to the bootstrap.min.css. Let's also change the comment. Similarly, let's also add the default styling that we have created, our custom styling. So it's going to be custom CSS and let's link to the style.css. Right, so that is what we have here apart from the bootstrap.min.css. And in the style.css, I have just basic few properties which we'll be using. The first one is that I'm just making the minimum height of our HTML and the body to be 100 VH. Apart from that, I also have few other things which is .back and .form background which we'll be using, right? So when we come across that, that's when I'll explain what the styling does. But for now, just have it with you. We'll be using that later on. So let's close that off. Let's also similarly link to the script file as well. So I'll just remove the href here. Let's also remove the integrity and cross origin. So we also have the bootstrap.min.js which is present here. Okay, I think it's bundle.min.js. Okay, it's going to be bootstrap.bundle.min.js, right? So the naming has to be correct. Okay, so let's close this off. Let's go to the browser and let's see. Okay, everything still seems to be working. That means nothing has broken, right? So now essentially we have created the main page. So what I'll be doing now is that I just want to add an icon here. Let's say like an arrow icon. So in order to do that, we'll be using a library called as Font Awesome. So let's type in fontawesome.com. So if you don't have an account in Font Awesome, I highly suggest you to do that. So let me just log into my account. In that you have to create a kit and I have already done that. So I'll just go to my own kit which I've created. And I'll just copy the script tag of that particular kit which I created. Let's copy the kit code from here. Let's go back to our default blade.php and let's add that script here. So let's save that and let's close this off. Now I want to add the icon here. So for that, let's go back to the browser and let's search for arrow. Now in this, let's change the version from 6.1.0 to 5 because I don't have access to that. So I'll be going with the 5th version. Let's search for the arrow and I'll just go with this one. So I'll just copy the solid version of it. So let's copy this. Let's go back to our code and let's paste that here and let's save it. Let's go back to the browser. Let's refresh the page and we have the icon here. So now when I click on this, we have to essentially go to the list page wherein we have all the blocks. So for that, let's create a new file. So let's go to the views and let's create. So in this, we'll be writing the code, but what I'll be doing is that instead of directly placing it here, let's create a new folder, right? So let's name it as, let's say, pages. Now I'll just place my post.blade.php inside of that particular folder. So that will be organized and we also have a structure that we are maintaining, right? So inside of this, similar to the home page, let's again extend the default layout. So we'll be adding that here. Let's also add the sections, right? So we have to create the section once again. Alright, so now we have to first create a route so that we can actually access this particular file. So let's go to the blog.php. In that, let's copy the get route once again and let's paste that here. So now let's change the route. So it will be post. So now inside the post controller, we have to call a function. But which function do we call? So we have a lot of functions here: index, create, store, and show. But there is no function which we can use to showcase all the posts at once. So for that, we have to create a new function, right? So let's name it as post. Okay, so we have to call a function called as post, but we don't have a particular function, right? So let's create that particular function. Now inside of this post function, we'll be retrieving the post from the database and we'll be showcasing that. But for now, let's just return the page that we want to showcase. Okay, so I think this should work, but the problem with this is that this particular post that we're trying to call is not directly present inside of our views folder, as it was the case with home. Instead, it's present inside of the pages folder, right? So we have to append this with pages. So it's going to be pages.posts. And this should essentially call this. Let's just type in some dummy data just to see if we are able to access it. Let's save that and go to the page, right? And let's click on show blocks. Okay, so we have essentially forgot to actually link it so that when you click on this, it should go there, right? So it should call the route. So let's go back to the home page. And in that, in the href of the anchor tag, we have to call the route which we want to go to. So similar to how we used the asset, we'll be again using the annotation which is present inside of Laravel Blade, right? So in this, what we'll be doing is that we'll be using the function called as route. Inside of this route, we have to give the route that we want to call. So if I go back to the blog, you'll see that we want to call /routes. But the thing is that this will change, right? Sometimes we don't want to, append this with /post. Let's say I want to give it as let's say list of posts or something like that. This can change, right? What we want to happen is that even though the route will change, we want to have a name for this particular route. So in order to make that happen, what we want to do is that we want to name this route, right? So we want to create this route as a named route. So there is a concept in routes called as naming a route or named routes. So the way that we can achieve that in Laravel is by typing out an arrow, then a name, and in that function, we'll be typing it as post, right? So essentially what we've done is that instead of giving it as /post wherever we want to call this particular thing, what we can do is that we can just directly type in this particular name, right? If I give it as, let's say, post. If I save that and if I go to the browser, now when I refresh the page and if I click on show blocks, it's going to go to /post. But if I change this route to, let's say, all posts or something like that, and if I go back, refresh the page once again, and now if I click on show blogs, it's going to go to all posts, right? So essentially we are changing the route that is being showcased in the front end, but inside of our code we have not changed anything, right? We are still calling the route called as post, right? So that means that we have essentially created a route which has a name to it, and instead of using /all posts, we can directly use the name to call this particular route. Okay, so that is how you create a named route. So this is an unnamed route and this is a named route. So that is the main difference. So now let's change this back to post. That should be enough. Let's click on that. Okay, we have to refresh page. Let's click on that, and that's going to go to /post. So in here, let's create the design in which we can showcase all the posts. So for that, I'll be using the Bootstrap cards that we have. So let's go to the documentation and let's search for cards. So there are multiple cards here that we can use. So what I'll be doing is that I'll just create my own card. So if you want to use any of the pre-default cards which are present here, you can just copy the code from here and place it inside of your particular file, and that should work. So for now, what I'll be doing is that I'll just type it out on my own. So I have created a Bootstrap card. So we have the card class, then we have the card body, then that we have the card title and text, which is dummy title and some dummy data. Then we also have a text and division, and that we have an anchor tag. If I save this and if I go to the browser and let's refresh this, you'll see that we have something like this, right? So we don't want this to happen. Instead, we want to have a small card. So what I'll do is that I'll just cut this from here. Let's create a container. In that container, let's paste this particular code. And let's also add some more properties to the container. Let's add some padding to the top and let's save that and let's go back and refresh. You'll see that now we have something like this. But I don't want to stack it one below the other. Instead, I want to create a grid wherein I have cards one beside the other and also one below the other, right? In order to make that happen, what we can do is that we can use the row and column properties. But before that, let's change this. I don't want to have a view button here. Instead, I want to have an arrow, right? So let's go back to Font Awesome and let's search for something else. So I'll just use this one, which is double angle right or something like that. Let's copy the code from here. Let's go back and let's remove this view and let's paste the icon tag. Okay, let's save that and go back and refresh. So we have an arrow. Okay, so now what I want to do is that I want to create a row and a column, right? So let's remove the card from here and let's create a row. In that row, I want to have column of 3. In that, I'll be having this particular data, right? So let's copy that and let's paste 2 more times. Let's save that and go to the browser and refresh. So we have 3 cards. Let's copy and paste that 2 more times. Let's save that and refresh. So we have something like this. But the problem here is that, as you can see, the cards are aligning when you place it one below the other. So we also want to have some type of margin between each and every card, one below the other. So for that, what I'll do is that I'll use the gutters, right? So let's go back here and beside the row, let's give it a margin top of 3 and gutters as 2. Let's save that and refresh. Then we'll have some spacing here. The reason why I've given a margin top is something that you'll understand later on, but for now, let's keep it like that. So essentially, this is how we'll be showcasing our blog post. And when you click on this, that should go to the blog post page wherein you will be showcasing the data. So we'll create that single blog post page when we showcase the actual data. For now, let's just leave it here. Okay, so now what I want to do is that above this particular blog section, I want to have a button here on the right hand side saying create. And when I click on that, that should go to the create page, right? So let's create that. So I'll be minimizing all of these. Okay, so we'll be minimizing the row, and above this row, I want to create that button. So let me quickly do that. So what I've done is that I've created 2 anchor tags. One is a dummy anchor tag, which is going to host our icon, which we can click and go back to the home page. And the second one is a create post button, which we can click and go to the create page, right? So I've flexed this out to the left and right. And let's first, before doing anything else, let's actually add the icons which we want to showcase. So I want to have a back icon here, and I also want to have a plus icon here. Let's go back to the Font Awesome and let's search for. Okay, I think I can use an arrow here. There should be an arrow option. I think I can use this one, right? So let's copy this reply. Let's paste that here. Similarly, let's go with the plus one. So I'll go to the top and let's type in plus. Okay, this should be enough, I think. Let's copy the plus. Let's go and paste that out here. So let's save that and go back to the browser and let's refresh the page. And we should have something like this. Okay, we need to add some space here. Let's add the space here. Refresh, that should do it. For now, let's add the hashtags into href, and when we actually have the routes for those pages, that's when we'll be adding this. We can actually remove this for the index page because we already have that route. So I'll just type it as, let's say, index or something like that, or let's give it as home. Okay, we have to make the route as a named route. So we can actually use this particular thing directly here as well. So instead of using the route parameter, we have something called as URL. We have to type that out, and we have to type it out as / I presume. So when you do that, it's going to essentially do the same thing, but it's best practice to name your routes and just use that here wherever you want to use that particular route. So let's save that and go to the browser. Let's refresh. Now if I click on this, that's going to go to the home page, and if I click on this, that's going to go to the blog page. Similarly, we'll be creating a page for the create post as well, wherein we'll be having a form in which we can create a new blog post. So we'll be doing all of that in the upcoming videos. And as always, the code for this particular video and all the upcoming videos will be available in the description down below. You can go there and go to the GitHub repository and copy the code and use it however you want. And let me know in the comment section down below if you have any queries regarding this particular video. So that's it for this video, guys. I hope you have liked what you've seen till now. If you did, then please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe as well. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.